Hello, my name is Tana Shigley, and my topic is Ethnic Literature Inspires Learning. When I was younger, I knew that reading was something I'd want to do all of my life. I enjoyed all types of books written by many different authors, but I noticed that not many of those authors were African American, and that was a concern. Recently, I talked to a parent whose son attended and has since graduated from a magnet program. And she said that her son, who is African American, had not read many books by black authors. In fact, he'd only read one book by a black author. And so I started to think, where are the ethnic books, please? Because of the demographics of Montgomery, Alabama, one would think that in its public school system, more literature by ethnic writers is what our children are exposed to, but that is not the case. Over 56%, actually 56.6% of Montgomery is listed as African American in the 2010 census. And this is something that's a concern for not only me here in Montgomery, Alabama, but also to a little girl in Orange, New Jersey, who made headlines when she noticed that she too read a lot of books, but those books did not have writers who were African American, or those books were not written by a diverse group of writers. And so this little girl decided to work with her mother and also another organization to form a group called #1000 Black Girls Book Movement. And the goal was to raise as much money as possible to purchase books or get enough donations of books to share them with children as far as they could. And that is a movement that continues. Here's a picture of little Marley, and here's a quote from her that she gave to CNN, and she said, "Whenever you see a character you identify with, you carry it with you and it inspires you. I want to introduce girls like me to books that will inspire them." So if someone as young as this 11-year-old can notice that literature inspires learning, then I think that's a topic that bears some discussion. American schools reflect diversity, and the census figures are showing that the Latino population is the fastest growing minority in America. And I know that now in this political season, a lot of people are talking about diversity. And while we can't debate that diversity exists, it does in the population, we can do something about the type of literature that our youth are enjoying in the learning process. Alabama's student population is increasingly diverse, but it's not growing as quickly as in other portions of the country. In 2012, over 19,000 students enrolled in public schools in Alabama spoke English as a second language, and that's an indicator that they're of either Latino, Asian American, Native American, a small percentage of Native American, or of another ethnic group, but mostly Latino and Spanish-speaking persons. Despite the change in the population, ethnic literature is being ignored, and this presentation explores some of those reasons why we need to have ethnic literature in the schools and how including that helps students become confident readers and writers. And looking through my research, I noticed that a lot of the articles that focus on this topic were addressing English as second language teachers who work with ethnic learners. And one of the authors that I read work about said that in Writer Identity and ESL Learners said that she found that focusing on critical discourse analysis was helpful. And what they did was they found ways to incorporate learning by embracing cultural diversity and including aspects of culture in the writing process, having students write about things that were relative to them, having parents read literature related to their culture to the children as part of the learning process. And that is something that a lot of the research pointed to, and another set of researchers noticed that sometimes children, or learners rather, react to how other people react to their learning. For example, I know this sounds complicated, but for example, there's an Asian learner who is Korean, and she felt that she could not write well because of the way that she used words, her syntax. And that's, something that I think learners of English as a second language learner struggle with, because English language it can be difficult if your native tongue puts verbs in different locations, or adjectives and adverbs in different locations. And so this writer in particular, this Asian girl, became more confident as she learned that how she wrote was not necessarily wrong. It reflected how she learned to speak English and the broken English that her relatives spoke. And as her language skills grew, her confidence grew, and she began to embrace telling her story and enjoying writing. So that's an important thing that we need to focus on. Culture and writing. The two are inseparable. So when we write and read and learn about things that are familiar with us, we're encouraged to do that. Writer Sam Gerges talks about that process, and he states in his research that the two are inseparable. You can't separate out a culture and writing. And he points to some of the work of Toni Morrison and Henry Louis Gates Jr. and Frederick Douglass, and how their ethnicity impacted some of their literature. And ethnic literature and reading, I think, are two subjects that need to be combined, because students who don't have much cultural interaction with other groups may not read work that's by diverse authors, and that kind of limits the worldview, and it also limits their understanding of discussions of themes in literature. And Hector Perez noted, when looking at George Washington Gomez, which is a novel by a Latino American, he was Mexican and Caucasian, he noted that sometimes the novel's artistic texture is enhanced by the identification of problematic issues within the Texas Mexican community, especially in terms of class and gender. And that was in reference to George Washington Gomez. And so what he's noting is that the author, even though it was a fictional character, the author wrote about this little boy named George Washington Gomez, and some of the same types of things that one would imagine a young boy at the turn of the in the middle of the early 1900s experienced when his land was taken by Caucasians who took over Mexican property. And so this fictional character helps to bring to the forefront questions about classism, racism, and identity. And that's something that this novel, a discussion of this novel, could open up for young people. Teaching ethnic literature exposes students to different cultures. So this novel, which is titled The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian, was an example that one of the researchers used when talking about how incorporating ethnic literature into a classroom setting can help with learning. And in this instance, the researcher found that a Latino American young man used this article, I'm sorry, let me back up. This novel was written by a Native American, and he focused on something really odd that happened in his life. He was sitting in class and he noticed that his mother's name was in his textbook, that his textbook was so old that his mother's name was still in the textbook, and that his school used all of the cast out material from the white schools. And he became so despondent, the character did, that he threw the book at his teacher and he was expelled. And so he decided to keep a diary about some of the things that he experienced as a Native American. Now this is a fictional piece of work, but the student who read this in turn used this as a way to talk about racism, and how people are discriminated against because of economic status. So it was a way to open up a discussion about a topic that, you know, to the Native American culture, if there's a Native American in the classroom who's grown up on a reservation or knows of family members who are on reservations and who lived in poor existence, then this might open up a gateway to discussion, and that student could identify with this. And then on the flip side, students who have not experienced this have another view to look at when they're analyzing literature. The aspect of what someone else's view of the world is. Making ethnic literature required. One of the ways to make changes to increase the scope of learning among English as second language students is to use novels to incorporate themes that are specific to culture. So some of the books that are used we would identify with a culture, like the one that we just talked about. But this one, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, I know that a lot of people think of Huck Finn and the issue of slavery and the issue of racism. But there was a young boy, a Latino male, who used this to identify with the male identity. So he focused on this book and some others to talk about machismo, what it meant to be a man in the Latino community. So this was a way for him to explore that theme and not explore the traditional theme of racism. So that's a good way to, broaden a student's ability to analyze literature. Diverse schools should include diverse literature. The census figures are showing that we're becoming more of a melting pot in there. There seems to be some slow movement towards making sure that we're being a little more inclusive in the type of literature that we're requiring that students read. And that may be because the educators are not broadening their horizons and are not reading varied works by different authors. In a recent class that I took, I know that I read a piece by an Asian American. He was actually Korean American, about a Korean American. Story by a Native American, about a Native American. And those types of discussions and readings helps broaden my understanding of how an English as a second language student might feel in a learning system in which he or she does not feel that he or she is being embraced by the system. His culture is being ignored. Her opinions are not being considered. So just as little Marley said, we want to read things that reflect who we see in the mirror. And that's just a natural occurrence. It's interesting to read about other people's lives, but that familiarity might help a student do just a little bit more. Here are some of the articles that I used in my research and the paper that I presented. And I think that there are so many more. I know that there are so many more articles available on this topic because of our growing population of English as second language speakers. Thank you so much, and my name is Tana Sheely, and I've been talking with you about ethnic literature inspiring learners.